The champagne flute shattered against the marble floor as I watched my sister Victoria kiss my fiancé at the altar where I was supposed to be standing. 300 guests gasped in horror, but all I could hear was the sound of my world crumbling. What they didn't know was that one phone call later, Victoria would lose everything she'd ever cared about, and I would be the one holding the detonator. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. My name is Alexis Montgomery, and until 6 months ago, nobody in my family knew that I owned a controlling stake in Montgomery Industries, the very company that employed half our relatives and funded their comfortable lifestyles. They thought I was just the quiet sister who worked as a low-level marketing coordinator at some small tech firm. They had no idea that the small tech firm was actually my multi-million-dollar consulting company, and that I'd been the silent majority shareholder of our family's empire since I turned 25. I preferred it that way. Money changes people, and I'd seen what it did to families. So when I met David Blackwood at a coffee shop in downtown Seattle, I told him I worked in marketing for a small company. He was charming, ambitious, and worked as a financial advisor for a growing firm. We fell in love over late-night conversations about travel dreams and shared values, not bank accounts and investment portfolios. Victoria, my older sister, had always been the golden child, beautiful, charismatic, and utterly ruthless when it came to getting what she wanted. She worked as a regional manager for Montgomery Industries, a job she'd landed purely through nepotism, though she loved to pretend it was merit. Our parents, Richard and Helen Montgomery, doted on her every accomplishment while treating my career like a charming hobby. "Alexis works in marketing or something," Victoria would say dismissively at family gatherings, waving her hand as if my entire professional life was beneath notice. She's always been the dreamer of the family. What they didn't know was that their dreamer had been quietly revolutionizing digital marketing strategies for Fortune 500 companies while building a personal empire that dwarfed anything Victoria could imagine. My consulting firm, Sterling Digital Solutions, had contracts with Amazon, Microsoft, and Google. But to my family, I was still little Alexis, who played around with computers. The Montgomery family dynamics had been toxic for years, but I'd learned to navigate them by staying invisible. Victoria thrived on being the center of attention, so I let her have it. She needed to feel superior, so I played the role of the underachieving younger sister. It kept peace in the family, and honestly, it made my life easier when no one expected anything from me. But everything changed when I brought David home for the first time. "He's absolutely gorgeous," Victoria purred, her eyes raking over David with the subtlety of a predator sizing up prey. "Financial advisor, you said? That's so stable. How refreshing that someone in this family is thinking practically about their future." The barb was aimed at me, of course. Victoria had always criticized my unrealistic career choices, never knowing that I probably earned more in a month than she did in a year. But I bit my tongue and smiled, watching as she positioned herself between David and me during dinner, monopolizing the conversation with stories about her high-level executive responsibilities. David was polite, but clearly uncomfortable with Victoria's aggressive attention. Later that night, as we drove back to my apartment, he shook his head in bewilderment. "Your sister is intense," he said carefully. "That's one word for it," I replied, squeezing his hand. "She's always been competitive. But don't worry about it. She'll lose interest once the novelty wears off." I was wrong, so very catastrophically wrong. Over the next few months, Victoria inserted herself into our relationship with surgical precision. She started showing up at restaurants where David and I were having dinner, claiming coincidence. She'd call him directly to ask about investment advice for her substantial savings. She began inviting herself to our movie nights and weekend trips, always with some excuse about needing sister bonding time. "I just want to get to know the man who's stolen my little sister's heart," she'd say with that perfect smile that had been charming people since childhood. David, being a decent person, didn't want to cause family drama by telling her to back off. And I stupidly thought I could handle Victoria the way I always had, by letting her have her moment in the spotlight until she moved on to something else. But Victoria wasn't planning to move on. She was planning to take over. The first real sign of trouble came when David proposed. He'd planned an intimate dinner at the restaurant where we had our first date. Just the two of us. Somehow, Victoria found out and showed up by accident, just as he was getting down on one knee. "Oh my God!" she squealed, rushing over with her phone already recording. "I can't believe I'm witnessing this. This is so perfect." What should have been a private romantic moment became Victoria's social media content. She posted the video everywhere, positioning herself as the loving sister who just happened to capture this magical moment. The comments were full of praise for her thoughtfulness and excitement. David was frustrated, but tried to make the best of it. "At least we have it on video," he said with forced cheerfulness. And she seemed genuinely happy for us. Victoria's happiness, as it turned out, was entirely performative. Over the following weeks, as we planned our wedding, she systematically inserted herself into every decision while undermining my choices with subtle cruelty. "Are you sure about that dress, Alexis? It's a bit plain for someone marrying into David's family. His parents are quite sophisticated, you know. That venue seems a little budget for a Montgomery wedding. What will people think? I hope David realizes that when he marries you, he's not exactly marrying into money. Someone should probably prepare him for that reality." Each comment was designed to make me feel small and inadequate, while positioning herself as the superior sister who truly understood what David deserved. She volunteered to handle vendor communications, claiming she had, quote, better negotiation skills. She insisted on approving the guest list because she knew what kind of people would be appropriate. She even tried to convince me to let her plan the bachelorette party because she, quote, had connections that could make it really special. I should have seen what was happening. I should have recognized the systematic way she was taking control of my wedding while simultaneously chipping away at my confidence and my relationship with David. But I was blinded by the naive hope that my sister, despite all her flaws, would ultimately want me to be happy. The final weeks before the wedding were a blur of escalating manipulation. Victoria would corner David at family gatherings, making comments about how I wasn't ready for marriage and how he deserved someone more mature and established. She'd suggest that maybe we were rushing things, that a longer engagement might be wise. Meanwhile, she was working on me from the other side, filling my head with doubts about David's commitment and suggesting that maybe he was having second thoughts. "I just think he seems a little distant lately," she'd say with fake concern. "Maybe he's realizing that marriage is a big step. You know how men get cold feet." I started noticing things that weren't there. David's phone calls seeming shorter, his smiles looking forced, his kisses feeling routine. Victoria's poisonous suggestions were taking root, creating doubt where there had been certainty. The night before our wedding, at the rehearsal dinner, Victoria gave a toast that should have been my first real warning. "To my baby sister Alexis," she said, raising her champagne glass with practiced elegance, "who's always been such a dreamer, and to David, who's patient enough to love a dreamer. May your marriage be everything you hope it will be, and may you both get exactly what you deserve." The words sounded loving to everyone else, but I caught the subtle emphasis, the hidden meaning. Victoria wasn't wishing us well, she was making a promise. As the guests mingled after dinner, I watched Victoria corner David near the bar. They spoke in hushed tones, her hand resting on his arm, her body language intimate and conspiratorial. When I approached, they broke apart quickly, both wearing guilty expressions. "What were you two talking about?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. "Just last-minute jitters," Victoria said with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "I was giving David some sisterly advice about marriage." David nodded, but he wouldn't quite meet my eyes. "Yeah, just, normal pre-wedding stuff." That night, alone in my hotel room, I stared at the wedding dress hanging in the closet and felt a chill of premonition. Something was wrong. Something had been wrong for months, and I'd been too trusting, too naive, too willing to believe in my sister's better nature to see it. But I told myself I was just having normal pre-wedding anxiety. Tomorrow, I would marry the man I loved, and all of Victoria's games would become irrelevant. We would be husband and wife, and she would have to accept that she hadn't won this time. Tomorrow, I thought, everything would be different. I had no idea how right I was. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. The morning of my wedding dawned gray and drizzly, which seemed fitting given the knot of anxiety that had been growing in my stomach since the rehearsal dinner. I tried to shake off the unease as my bridesmaids bustled around the bridal suite, chattering excitedly about hair and makeup schedules. "You're glowing," squealed my maid of honor, Sarah Chen, as she helped me into my robe. "I can't believe today is finally here." Victoria swept into the room like a hurricane, already perfectly made up, despite it being barely 8 in the morning. She wore a stunning emerald dress that somehow managed to look both appropriate for a wedding and eye-catching enough to draw attention from the bride. "Good morning, Mrs. Blackwood-to-be," she sang, air-kissing my cheek. "Are you ready for the biggest day of your life?" Something in her tone made me pause. There was an excitement in her voice that felt wrong, predatory almost. But before I could analyze it further, she was already taking charge of the room. "Ladies, I've taken the liberty of revising the timeline," Victoria announced, producing a clipboard from seemingly nowhere. "We need to be more efficient if we want everything to be perfect." She began barking orders like a drill sergeant, repositioning the photographer, rearranging the flowers, and critiquing the bridesmaids' hair choices. Within minutes, she'd turned my peaceful morning into a high-stress production. "Victoria," I said gently, "maybe we should just stick to the original plan." "Trust me, little sister," she interrupted with that condescending smile I'd grown to hate. "I know what I'm doing, you just focus on being beautiful." The condescension stung, but I bit my tongue. Today was my wedding day, and I wasn't going to let Victoria's need for control ruin it. That's when my phone buzzed with a text from David. "Can we talk? Something important I need to discuss with you before the ceremony." My heart skipped a beat. Cold feet? Last-minute doubts? I quickly typed back, "Is everything okay? We're not supposed to see each other before the wedding." "It's fine," came his reply. "Just meet me in the rose garden in 10 minutes. Please, Alexis, it's important." Victoria, who had been hovering nearby, glanced at my phone screen. "David wants to see you. How romantic. A little pre-wedding rendezvous." Her voice was light, but something flickered in her eyes that made my skin crawl, almost like satisfaction. "I'll be right back," I told the bridesmaids, grabbing a robe to throw over my slip. The rose garden behind the venue was secluded and beautiful, the perfect spot for intimate conversations. I found David standing with his back to me, his shoulders tense beneath his suit jacket. "David, what's wrong?" He turned, and I was shocked by how haggard he looked. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, and there were dark circles under his eyes like he hadn't slept all night. "Alexis, we need to talk about Victoria." My stomach dropped. "What about her?" He ran his hands through his hair, clearly struggling with whatever he needed to say. "She came to my room last night, after you went to bed." The world tilted slightly. "What do you mean, she came to your room?" "She said she needed to tell me something important about you, something I deserved to know before we got married." I felt sick. What could she possibly have to tell you that I haven't already? David's face was a mask of confusion and pain. "She said you've been lying to me about who you really are, that your family has been supporting you financially this whole time, and you've been pretending to be independent when really you're just living off their money." The accusation was so twisted, so perfectly crafted to hit my insecurities that I almost laughed. Victoria had taken the truth, that I was financially independent, and flipped it into the exact opposite lie. "David, that's not." "She showed me bank statements, Alexis. Transfer from Montgomery Industries to your personal account, large ones." My blood turned to ice. Those weren't support payments, they were dividend payments from my ownership stake. But I'd never told David about my real financial situation, so he had no context to understand what he was seeing. "She also said," David continued, his voice getting quieter, "that you've been telling your family that I'm just a temporary thing, that you don't really see a future with me." "That's a complete lie," I exploded. "David, you have to know that's not true." "I don't know what to believe anymore," he said miserably. "Why didn't you tell me about the money? Why keep that secret?" I opened my mouth to explain, to tell him everything about my real net worth, my company, the truth about my family dynamics. But before I could speak, Victoria's voice rang out across the garden. "There you are! I've been looking everywhere for you two." She appeared on the path like she'd materialized from thin air, though I suspected she'd been watching and waiting for the perfect moment to interrupt. Her timing was flawless, cutting off my explanation right when I was about to defend myself. "The photographer is having a meltdown," she said breathlessly. "Alexis, we need you back in the bridal suite immediately. And David, your groomsmen are looking for you." "We're not done talking," I said firmly, reaching for David's hand. But he pulled away slightly. "Maybe we should discuss this later, after everything." The way he said everything made it clear he wasn't sure there would be an after. Victoria had planted her poison perfectly, and now she was preventing me from administering the antidote. "Come on," Victoria said, linking her arm through mine with fake sisterly affection. "You can't keep everyone waiting on your special day." As she dragged me away from David, she leaned in close and whispered, "Don't worry, little sister. I'll take good care of him for you." The next few hours passed in a haze of forced smiles and growing dread. Every time I tried to get a message to David, Victoria intercepted it. When I asked to see him for just 5 minutes, she reminded me about wedding traditions and bad luck. When I tried to call him, she conveniently needed my help with some urgent bridal emergency. She'd positioned herself as the perfect sister, solving every problem and managing every detail, while systematically ensuring that David and I remained separated and unable to resolve our misunderstanding. "Something's wrong," Sarah whispered to me as the makeup artist applied my lipstick. "You look like you're going to be sick." "I'm fine," I lied, watching Victoria in the mirror as she bustled around the room, just nervous. But I wasn't just nervous. I was terrified. Every instinct I had was screaming that something terrible was about to happen, and Victoria was orchestrating all of it. As we prepared to leave for the ceremony, Victoria pulled me aside one last time. "Alexis," she said, her voice dripping with false sincerity, "I just want you to know how proud I am of you. You've always been such a naive little dreamer, but look at you now, about to marry a successful man who sees past all your limitations." The word limitations hit like a slap. She was still playing the game, still positioning herself as the superior sister even as she prepared to destroy me. "I hope you get everything you deserve today," she continued, echoing her toast from the night before. "Both of you." As our car pulled up to the church, I saw the crowd of 300 guests filing in. My parents stood at the entrance, greeting people with proud smiles. David's family mingled with mine, everyone dressed in their finest clothes, everyone expecting to witness a celebration of love. What they were about to see instead was the systematic destruction of everything I held dear, orchestrated by the one person who was supposed to love me unconditionally. Victoria squeezed my hand as we sat in the car, waiting for our cue to enter. "Ready to become Mrs. Blackwood?" she asked with that perfect smile. But as I really looked at her, I saw something in her eyes that made my blood run cold. It wasn't love or excitement or even jealousy. It was a triumph. Victoria wasn't here to witness my wedding. She was here to ensure it never happened. And judging by the satisfied gleam in her eyes, her plan was already in motion. The wedding march began, and my heart hammered against my ribs as the church doors opened. 300 faces turned toward me, all smiling, all expecting to witness a fairy tale. My father, distinguished in his black tuxedo, offered me his arm with tears of pride in his eyes. "You look absolutely radiant, sweetheart," he whispered as we began the long walk down the aisle. "David is the luckiest man alive." If only he knew that luck was about to run out. I forced myself to smile and wave at familiar faces in the crowd. My college roommates, David's business partners, extended family members who'd flown in from across the country. Everyone looked so happy, so hopeful. The church was decorated exactly as I'd dreamed, white roses cascading from every surface, candles flickering in the afternoon light filtering through stained glass windows. But as we approached the altar, I noticed something that made my stomach lurch. David wouldn't look at me. He stood rigid beside his best man, Marcus, staring straight ahead with an expression I'd never seen before. Not nervousness, something colder, more distant. Victoria was already at the altar in her position as maid of honor, looking absolutely stunning in that emerald dress. She caught my eye and smiled, but there was something predatory about it, like a cat who'd cornered a mouse. The officiant, Reverend Patterson, began the ceremony with his warm, familiar voice. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Alexis Montgomery and David Blackwood. I tried to catch David's eye, to silently communicate that we needed to talk, that whatever Victoria had told him could be explained. But he remained focused on some point beyond my head, his jaw clenched tight. If anyone has just cause why these two should not be wed, speak now or forever hold your peace, Reverend Patterson intoned. The traditional words hung in the air, and I felt a moment of relief that we'd made it through the worst part. Nobody ever actually objected at weddings. It was just ceremonial language, a relic from I object. The words rang out clear and strong, and my world stopped spinning. David had spoken. My fiancé, the man I'd planned to spend my life with, had just objected to our marriage. The church erupted in shocked gasps and whispers. I heard my mother's sharp intake of breath, saw my father's face go white with confusion. 300 guests leaned forward in their seats, straining to understand what was happening. David? I whispered, my voice barely audible over the chaos. What are you doing? He finally looked at me, and the coldness in his eyes nearly broke me. I can't marry someone who's been lying to me from the very beginning. David, please. I reached for his hand, but he stepped back. Whatever Victoria told you. This isn't about Victoria, he said loudly enough for the entire church to hear. This is about you, Alexis. About the person you really are. Reverend Patterson looked completely bewildered. In 30 years of conducting weddings, this was clearly a first for him. Perhaps we should step into the vestry and discuss this privately. No, David said firmly. Everyone deserves to know the truth. I felt like I was drowning. 300 pairs of eyes were boring into me, waiting for some explanation, some defense. But I couldn't speak. The magnitude of Victoria's betrayal was hitting me like a physical blow. David, son, what's this about? My father called out from the front pew, his voice tight with embarrassment and confusion. David turned to address the crowd, his voice carrying easily through the suddenly silent church. Alexis has been living a double life. She's been pretending to be an independent, successful woman, when really she's been supported by her family's money this entire time. The accusation hung in the air like poison. I saw the confusion on my parents' faces shift to hurt. They thought I'd been lying to David about our family, painting them as financially controlling when they'd always been supportive. That's not true, I said, finding my voice at last. David, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, he interrupted. Victoria showed me the bank records. Large monthly payments from Montgomery Industries straight into your account. She told me how you've been laughing about this behind my back, calling me naive for believing in your independence. The lie was so expertly crafted, so perfectly designed to hurt both David and my parents, that I almost admired Victoria's ruthlessness. She'd taken my legitimate business income and reframed it as charity, then added the fictional element of me mocking David to make the betrayal personal. Victoria stepped forward then, her face a perfect mask of concern and reluctance. I'm sorry, everyone, I never wanted it to come out like this. I tried to handle it privately, but... She trailed off, letting the implication hang that she'd tried to protect me but ultimately couldn't stand by and watch David be deceived. Victoria, tell them the truth, I pleaded, turning to face my sister. Tell them what those payments really are. For just a moment, Victoria's mask slipped and I saw pure satisfaction flash across her features. Then it was back, the concerned sister act in full force. Alexis, please don't make this harder than it has to be, she said softly. I know you're embarrassed, but lying more isn't going to help. The church was in complete chaos now. Guests were talking over each other, trying to make sense of what they were witnessing. I could hear fragments of conversation. Never would have expected. Seemed so genuine. Poor David. What kind of family? My mother stood up from her seat, tears streaming down her face. Alexis, sweetheart, is this true? Have you been telling people we control your finances? The hurt in her voice was devastating. My parents had always been proud of my independence and had bragged to their friends about their daughter who'd made her own way in the world. Now they thought I'd been painting them as overbearing controllers while secretly accepting their money. Mom, no, it's not like that. But before I could explain, David was speaking again. There's more, he said, his voice getting stronger as he fed off the crowd's attention. Victoria also told me that Alexis never intended this marriage to last, that she's been telling her family I'm just a phase, someone to have fun with until she finds someone more suitable. This lie hit harder than the others because it was so personally cruel. David's biggest insecurity had always been that he wasn't good enough for me, that eventually I'd realize I could do better. Victoria had weaponized his deepest fear and turned it against both of us. David, I love you, I said desperately. I've never said any of those things. I would never. Stop lying, he shouted, and I actually flinched. Just stop. The church fell silent again, shocked by his outburst. David had always been so controlled, so gentle. Seeing him like this was disturbing everyone who knew him. Victoria moved closer to him, placing a comforting hand on his arm. It's okay, David, you don't have to go through with this. And that's when I saw it. The way her hand lingered on his arm, the way she positioned her body protectively between us, the satisfied gleam in her eyes as she watched my world crumble. You planned this, I said, the realization hitting me like lightning. You've been planning this from the beginning. Victoria's face was the picture of innocent confusion. Alexis, you're being paranoid. I was just trying to look out for David. No, I said, my voice getting stronger as the pieces fell into place. You've been manipulating both of us for months. The bank statements, the lies about what I supposedly said, you orchestrated all of this. But even as I spoke the truth, I could see it was too late. The damage was done. David was looking at me like I was a stranger, like everything we'd shared had been contaminated by lies. The guests were watching this family drama unfold with a mixture of horror and fascination. Marcus, David's best man, finally stepped forward. Maybe we should all take a step back and... There's nothing to step back from, David said flatly. The wedding is over. He began removing his boutonniere, his movements sharp and angry. I'm sorry everyone came out for this. I'm sorry for wasting your time. David, wait, I called after him as he started walking down the aisle. Please, just let me explain. But he didn't stop. He didn't even look back. Victoria followed him, still playing the concerned sister role. David, wait up! Let me make sure you're okay. And as I watched my sister chase after my ex-fiancé, leaving me standing alone at the altar in front of 300 horrified guests, I felt something inside me break. Not just my heart, that had been breaking all morning. Something deeper. Something that had been holding me back, keeping me small, making me play the role of the accommodating younger sister. That part of me died right there in front of the altar, in the ruins of what should have been the happiest day of my life. The woman who remained was done being manipulated, done being underestimated, done playing by rules that only applied to her while Victoria got to cheat and lie and destroy without consequences. I looked out at the sea of confused, pitying faces and made a decision that would change everything. Victoria wanted to destroy my life with lies and manipulation? Fine. But she'd forgotten one crucial detail in all her scheming. She had no idea who she was really dealing with. And she was about to find out. The reception hall looked like a ghost town. Elegant round tables set for 300 guests sat empty, their pristine white linens and elaborate centerpieces serving as monuments to my humiliation. The band packed up their instruments while catering staff quietly cleared untouched champagne flutes and wedding cake that would never be cut. I sat alone at the head table, still in my wedding dress, scrolling through my phone as notification after notification poured in. The wedding disaster was already spreading across social media like wildfire. Someone had live-streamed David's objection, and it was being shared, commented on, and dissected by strangers across the internet. The bride gets exposed at the altar. Gold digger wedding disaster compilation. When keeping it fake goes wrong. Each notification felt like a fresh slap, but I forced myself to read them all. I needed to see exactly how Victoria's narrative was being received, how thoroughly she'd destroyed my reputation. My parents approached cautiously, still dressed in their wedding finest but looking aged by the day's events. My mother's makeup was ruined from crying, and my father's proud demeanor had crumbled into confusion and disappointment. "Alexis," my mother said gently, sitting beside me, "we need to talk." I looked up from my phone, meeting their worried gazes. "About what? About how your daughter turned out to be a liar and a gold digger?" "Don't be sarcastic," my father said, though his voice lacked its usual authority. "We're trying to understand what happened. These accusations David made, are they true?" For a moment, I considered telling them everything. About Sterling Digital Solutions, about my real net worth, about the fact that I probably earned more than both of them combined. But something held me back. Maybe it was years of trained secrecy, or maybe I wanted to see how far this would go before I revealed my hand. "The money transfers David mentioned," I said carefully. "What do you think they were for?" My father shifted uncomfortably. "We thought maybe you'd asked us for help and were too proud to admit it. We've always told you that if you needed anything." "So you believe I've been secretly taking money from you while pretending to be independent?" "We don't know what to believe," my mother said, tears starting again. "Victoria showed us some concerning things. Text messages where you supposedly complained about David being, quote, beneath your social class. Bank records that don't match what you've told us about your income." I stared at them, amazed by Victoria's thoroughness. She hadn't just destroyed my relationship with David, she'd methodically undermined my relationships with everyone I cared about. "And you believed her?" "She's your sister," my father said weakly. "Why would she lie?" The question hung in the air unanswered because, of course, they couldn't imagine why Victoria would orchestrate something this elaborate and cruel. They saw her as the successful, reliable daughter and me as the dreamer who'd somehow gotten in over her head. My phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. Normally I would have ignored it, but something made me answer. "Alexis Montgomery?" The voice was crisp, professional. "This is Jennifer Walsh from TechCrunch. I'm calling about the wedding incident that's trending on social media. We'd like to offer you an opportunity to tell your side of the story." My parents watched as I took the call, their faces growing more concerned as they realized the media circus was just beginning. "I appreciate the interest, but I have no comment at this time," I said. "Ms. Montgomery, are you aware that someone has been posting additional information about you online? Financial records, business filings. There seems to be some confusion about your actual net worth and business holdings." My blood ran cold. "What kind of information?" "Well, there are documents suggesting you're connected to Sterling Digital Solutions. Some people are claiming you're actually quite wealthy, contradicting the narrative from today's events. Would you like to clarify?" I hung up without responding, but my mind was racing. Someone was digging deeper, looking beyond Victoria's carefully crafted lies. In the age of internet sleuthing, it was only a matter of time before my real identity surfaced. Another call came in, this time from a number I recognized. Sarah Chen, my maid of honor and one of my oldest friends. "Alexis, what the hell is going on?" she said without preamble. "I've been getting calls from reporters asking about your secret business empire. They're saying you own some major consulting firm." I looked at my parents, who were listening to every word with growing confusion. "Sarah, I can't really talk right now. Is it true? Are you actually rich? Because if you are, this whole thing with David makes no sense. Why would Victoria lie about—" She stopped abruptly. "Oh my God. Alexis, she was setting you up, wasn't she?" "I have to go," I said, ending the call. But the damage was done. My parents were staring at me with a mixture of confusion and dawning realization. "Alexis," my mother said slowly, "what is Sterling Digital Solutions?" Before I could answer, Victoria burst into the reception hall with Marcus, David's best man, in tow. She looked flustered for the first time all day, her perfect composure cracking around the edges. "There you are," she said breathlessly. "We need to talk. Right now." "I have nothing to say to you," I replied calmly. "The media is asking questions," Marcus said, looking uncomfortable. "Weird questions about business records and financial filings. David sent me to find out what's going on." Victoria's eyes darted between me and my parents. calculating her next move. It's probably just internet trolls making things up. You know how people love conspiracy theories. But her voice lacked its usual confidence. For the first time since I'd known her, Victoria looked genuinely worried. My phone rang again. This time it was my business partner and CFO, Michael Torres. "Alexis, I've been trying to reach you all day. We have a situation. Someone's been calling our biggest clients, asking questions about your involvement with the company. Microsoft is asking if it's true that their primary consultant just got exposed as a fraud at her wedding." I stepped away from the group to take the call privately, but I could feel Victoria watching my every movement. "Michael, I need you to prepare a full financial disclosure. Everything: net worth, business holdings, client contracts, dividend payments from Montgomery Industries. I want it all documented and ready to be released." "Are you sure? That's pretty private information." "I'm sure. And Michael, call our legal team. I want them to investigate anyone who's been accessing our financial records without authorization. Someone's been digging where they shouldn't be." When I returned to the group, Victoria was pacing nervously while my parents sat in stunned silence. "Who was that?" Victoria asked, trying to sound casual. "Business associates," I said simply. "What kind of business associates?" my father asked. "Alexis, we're starting to think we don't know you at all." Victoria jumped on this opening. "See? This is exactly what I was trying to protect David from. She's been lying to all of us." "Actually," I interrupted, "I think it's time everyone learned the truth." I pulled out my laptop and connected it to the reception hall's projector system, the same setup that was supposed to display our wedding photos. Instead, I pulled up my company's website. "Sterling Digital Solutions," I said, as the professional homepage filled the screen. "Founded 5 years ago. Current clients include Amazon, Microsoft, Google, Netflix, and about 40 other Fortune 500 companies." The room went dead silent as they processed the impressive client list. "Annual revenue last year was $47 million, I continued, clicking through to our financial highlights. "And yes, before you ask, I own controlling interest in the company." Victoria's face had gone white. "That's impossible." "Is it?" I turned to face her directly. "Is it impossible that your dreamer little sister built something successful? Or is it just impossible that you never noticed because you were too busy looking down on me?" My parents were staring at the screen in shock. My mother's hand was pressed to her mouth, while my father looked like he'd been hit by a truck. "The payments from Montgomery Industries that David mentioned," I continued. "Those are dividend payments from my 23% ownership stake in the family company, shares I purchased with my own money 3 years ago." "You own 23% of Montgomery Industries?" my father whispered. "Actually, as of last month, it's 28%. I've been quietly buying up shares whenever they become available." Victoria finally found her voice. "You're making this up. If any of this were true, we would have known." "Would you have?" I asked. "You've spent so much time dismissing me as irrelevant that you never bothered to actually look at what I was doing." My phone buzzed with another call. This time it was from David. I answered the speaker, curious to hear what he had to say now that the real story was beginning to emerge. "Alexis," his voice was strained, uncertain. "I've been getting calls from reporters. They're saying things about you that don't match what Victoria told me. I think we need to talk." Victoria lunged for my phone, trying to end the call, but I stepped back. "What kind of things are they saying, David?" "That you're actually wealthy, that you own a major consulting company, that the money transfers weren't support payments but business income." The silence in the room was deafening. Victoria looked like a cornered animal, her perfect plan unraveling in real time. "Is it true?" David asked quietly. I looked around the room, at my confused parents, my desperate sister, the empty reception hall that should have been filled with celebration. "Yes," I said simply, "it's all true." And with that single word, everything changed. The silence following my confession stretched for what felt like hours. David's breathing was audible through the phone speaker, while my parents stared at me like I was a stranger they'd never seen before. Victoria stood frozen, her usual composure completely shattered. "Alexis," David's voice came through the speaker, trembling with confusion and something that might have been hope. If this is true, if you really own this company and have all this money, then why didn't you tell me? It was the question I'd been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. The answer would either salvage something from this disaster or confirm that Victoria had succeeded in destroying us completely. Because I wanted you to love me for who I am, not what I'm worth, I said simply. I've seen what money does to relationships, David. I wanted ours to be real. But the lies Victoria showed me were fabricated, I interrupted. Victoria, show him the real bank statements now. Show him where those payments actually came from. Victoria's face cycled through several expressions: panic, calculation, defiance, before settling on desperate aggression. This is ridiculous, she snapped. You can fake websites, Alexis. You can make up financial documents. None of this proves anything. My father finally spoke, his voice heavy with a dawning realization. Victoria, what have you done? I protected this family. Victoria exploded, her mask finally slipping completely. Do you have any idea what David was really after? He's a middle-class nobody who saw dollar signs when he looked at the Montgomery name. That's not true, I said firmly. David never knew about the family money. He thought I was just a marketing coordinator. Exactly, Victoria whirled on me. He was dating down, settling for less than he deserved. I was doing him a favor by showing him what you really are. The twisted logic was breathtaking. Even now, caught in her lies, Victoria was trying to position herself as the hero of her own story. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Financial disclosure ready. Legal found something interesting about information breach. Call me. David, I said to the phone, I need you to come back to the reception hall. There are some things you need to see. I don't know if that's a good idea. Please, give me 1 hour to show you the truth. After that, if you still want to walk away, I'll understand. A long pause. Then, 1 hour. While we waited for David to return, I called Michael back, putting him on speaker so everyone could hear. What did you find? I asked without a preamble. Someone's been accessing your personal financial records illegally, Michael said. The breach came from inside Montgomery Industries. Someone with administrative access pulled your banking information, investment records, and private correspondence. My parents gasped, but I kept my focus on Victoria, whose face had gone ashen. Were you able to trace who accessed the information? Victoria Montgomery. She used her executive credentials to pull everything about you from the company systems. Email records show she's been monitoring your accounts for months. The room erupted. My mother let out a strangled cry while my father's face turned red with fury. Victoria, my mother shouted, you used your position at the company to spy on your sister? Victoria backed toward the door, her composure crumbling entirely. You don't understand. She was lying to all of us. I had to know the truth. The truth? I stood up, my voice deadly quiet. You want the truth, Victoria? Here's the truth. I pulled up another document on the projector, a detailed financial analysis I'd been working on for months. Montgomery Industries is hemorrhaging money, I announced. Quarterly profits are down 37%. Major contracts are being lost to competitors. The company is 6 months away from bankruptcy. My parents stared at the screen in horror. They'd been kept in the dark about the company's financial troubles, trusting Victoria and the other executives to handle operations. But here's the interesting part, I continued, clicking through to the next slide. The decline started exactly 18 months ago, right around the time Victoria was promoted to regional manager. That's a coincidence, Victoria said desperately. Is it? Because our forensic accountants found some very interesting patterns in the financial records. I displayed the next document, a detailed audit report that I'd commissioned privately. Inflated vendor contracts, fictitious consulting fees, unauthorized expense accounts, all traced back to accounts controlled by Victoria Montgomery. The room went dead silent, except for my mother's sharp intake of breath. You've been embezzling from our family's company, I said, turning to face Victoria directly. To the tune of $2.3 million over the past 18 months. Victoria's face went from white to green. That's not... You can't prove. I can and I have, I interrupted. The evidence is already with the district attorney's office. That was when David walked back into the reception hall, followed by Marcus and several other wedding guests who'd apparently decided to return and witness the drama's conclusion. They arrived just in time to see Victoria completely fall apart. "You vindictive bitch!" she screamed, launching herself at me. "You think you're so perfect with your secret company and your hidden money? You manipulated all of us?" Marcus and my father quickly restrained her before she could reach me, but her words echoed through the hall. "Manipulate you how?" David asked, staring at the scene in bewilderment. I turned to face him, and for the first time in hours, I felt completely calm. "David, I never lied to you about who I am. I'm the same person you fell in love with. I just happen to be financially successful. But why hide it? Because I've seen what happens when money becomes part of the equation too early in a relationship. I wanted us to build something real first." Victoria laughed bitterly from where Marcus was still holding her arms. "Real? Nothing about you is real, Alexis. You've been playing a part this whole time." "Have I?" I asked. "David, think about our relationship. Have I ever asked you to pay for expensive things? Have I ever made you feel inadequate about money? Have I ever acted entitled or spoiled?" David shook his head slowly. "No, you. You always insisted on splitting bills. You chose modest restaurants and activities. You seemed genuinely happy with simple things." "Because I was happy," I said simply. "Money doesn't change what brings me joy. It doesn't change how I feel about you." But the things Victoria showed me were either fabricated or taken completely out of context, I said. "Victoria, show him the original documents you used to create those fake text messages." Victoria's silence was enough. Michael's voice came through the phone again. "Alexis, there's more. We found drafts of fake text messages on Victoria's work computer. She's been manufacturing evidence for weeks." David looked like he'd been punched. You made it all up?" Victoria's defiance crumbled into desperate pleading. "David, you have to understand, she was going to hurt you. She's always thought she was better than everyone else." "By lying to me?" David's voice was getting louder. "By destroying our wedding with fabricated evidence? I was protecting you." "You were protecting yourself," I interrupted. "You couldn't stand that your underachieving little sister was more successful than you. You couldn't bear that I found love while you're still alone. So you decided to destroy both rather than let me be happy." The truth hung in the air like a physical presence. Victoria had stopped struggling against Marcus's grip and was now crying openly, her perfect facade completely destroyed. "The real question," I continued, looking around at everyone assembled, "is what happens now?" David stepped forward, his face a mixture of regret and determination. "Alexis, I am so sorry. I should have trusted you. I should have given you a chance to explain instead of believing my sister," I finished, "who you had no reason to doubt. Can you forgive me?" I looked at him, really looked at him. The man I'd planned to marry, who'd humiliated me in front of 300 people because he believed lies about my character without giving me a chance to defend myself. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Trust isn't something you can just rebuild with an apology." Victoria let out a bitter laugh through her tears. "Even if he forgives you, do you think anyone else will? The whole world saw what happened today. Your reputation is destroyed." I smiled then, and it wasn't a kind expression. "Victoria," I said softly, "you still don't understand who you're dealing with, do you?" I pulled out my phone and dialed a number that connected me directly to one of the most powerful PR firms in the country. "Rachel, it's Alexis Montgomery. I need you to prepare a full media response package. We're going public with everything." Victoria's face went ashen as she realized what was about to happen. "Everything?" Rachel asked. "Everything. The embezzlement, the fabricated evidence, the illegal access to financial records. I want the whole story told properly." As I hung up, I looked around at the faces staring at me, some in admiration, others in fear. "You see, Victoria, you made one critical error in your plan. You assumed I was as powerless as you needed me to be." I walked over to where she stood, still restrained but no longer struggling. "But I'm not the helpless little sister you thought you were destroying. I'm Alexis Montgomery, owner of Sterling Digital Solutions, major shareholder in Montgomery Industries, and someone with enough resources and connections to ensure that the truth comes out exactly as it happened. Victoria's lips moved soundlessly, the full scope of her miscalculation finally sinking in. "And Victoria?" I added, my voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "You haven't seen anything yet." The next 24 hours moved like a perfectly orchestrated symphony of destruction, Victoria's destruction. I spent the night in my penthouse apartment, a space Victoria had never seen because she'd never bothered to visit me anywhere that wasn't a family gathering. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Seattle skyline, and the minimalist decor reflected the person I really was, not the struggling marketing coordinator she'd imagined. My phone hadn't stopped ringing. Rachel Morrison, my PR strategist, had worked through the night crafting a media response that would reshape the entire narrative. By dawn, we had a comprehensive plan that would not only clear my reputation, but expose Victoria's crimes in the most devastating way possible. "The story is already shifting," Rachel reported during our early morning call. "The embezzlement angle is what really caught the media's attention. Financial fraud is much more interesting than a wedding drama." What about the social media response? Complete reversal. The hashtag has changed from #BrideExposed to #SistersSabotage. People love a good villain reveal, and Victoria fits the role perfectly. I was sipping coffee and reviewing the media strategy when my doorbell rang. Through the security camera, I saw David standing in the hallway, looking like he hadn't slept at all. "I know you probably don't want to see me," he said when I opened the door, "but I needed to apologize properly, away from all the chaos." He looked around my apartment, taking in the expensive furnishings, the original artwork, the view that probably cost more per month than his entire salary. "This is where you really live," he said quietly. "Yes. It's beautiful. It's you." He ran his hand through his hair. "God, Alexis, how did I get it so wrong?" I led him to the living room where we sat on opposite ends of my white leather couch, close enough to talk, far enough to maintain distance. "You got it wrong because Victoria is very good at manipulation," I said. "She's had years of practice." "That doesn't excuse what I did. I should have trusted you. I should have asked you directly instead of taking her word for everything." His phone buzzed, and he glanced at it with a grimace. "I've been getting calls all morning. Reporters, friends, business colleagues. Everyone wants to know how I fell for such an elaborate lie. How do you feel about that?" David was quiet for a long moment. Humiliated, angry, but mostly heartbroken that I threw away the best thing in my life because I was too insecure to believe someone like you could really love someone like me. Before I could respond, my phone rang. It was Detective Sarah Kim from the Seattle Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit. "Ms. Montgomery, we've reviewed the evidence your attorneys provided. We'll be issuing an arrest warrant for Victoria Montgomery this morning." "For embezzlement?" "Embezzlement, fraud, identity theft, and illegal access to computer systems. The evidence is overwhelming. She's looking at serious prison time." After I hung up, David stared at me with a mixture of awe and fear. "You really did it," he said. "You're actually going to destroy her." "She destroyed herself," I corrected. "I'm just making sure the truth comes out." My phone buzzed with a text from my father. "Victoria's been arrested. She's asking for a lawyer and claiming you framed her. Your mother is devastated. Can we talk?" "I have to go," I told David. "My parents need me." "Alexis, wait." He stood as I gathered my things. "Is there any chance, any possibility that we could try again? I know I don't deserve it, but—" "David, you didn't just break my trust. You humiliated me in front of 300 people without giving me a chance to defend myself. That's not something you can take back with apologies." The pain in his eyes was genuine, but I felt surprisingly little satisfaction in causing it. Victoria's betrayal had hardened something in me that might never soften again. When I arrived at my parents' house, I found them in their study, looking older than I'd ever seen them. My mother's eyes were red from crying, and my father sat slumped in his chair like he'd aged 10 years overnight. "The police came at 6 this morning," my mother said without preamble. "They arrested Victoria right here in this house. The neighbors saw everything." "I'm sorry it happened that way," I said, and I meant it. Despite everything, I hadn't wanted my parents to be traumatized by the spectacle. "Did you know?" my father asked. "When you were growing up, did you see signs that Victoria was capable of this?" I thought about all the small cruelties, the subtle manipulations, the way Victoria had always needed to be the center of attention, regardless of who got hurt. I knew she was selfish and competitive, I said. I didn't know she was a criminal. The lawyers say she could get 15 to 20 years, my mother whispered. Our daughter could spend decades in prison. Your other daughter was almost destroyed by lies and fraud, I replied gently. Victoria made her choices. My father looked up at me with something that might have been pride mixed with regret. We failed you, didn't we? We spent so much time celebrating Victoria's achievements that we never bothered to look at what you were accomplishing. You saw what she wanted you to see, I said. Victoria was always very good at managing perceptions. But you built an empire in secret. You own almost 30% of our family's company, and we had no idea. How did we miss that? I sat down across from them, finally ready to explain years of deliberate invisibility. Because I let you miss it. I wanted to prove I could succeed without the family name opening doors for me. I wanted to build something that was entirely mine. And you did, my mother said softly. You built something incredible, and we were too blind to see it. My phone buzzed with updates from Rachel. The story was exploding across every major news platform. Victoria's mugshot was trending on Twitter. Financial news networks were dissecting the embezzlement case. The wedding disaster had become a footnote to a much larger story about corporate fraud and family betrayal. There's something else, I said to my parents. Montgomery Industries is in worse shape than Victoria's embezzlement. The company needs a major restructuring, or it's going to fail completely. My father's face went pale. How bad is it? Bad enough that I've been quietly buying up shares not as an investment, but as a rescue operation. I was planning to step in and save the company anonymously. Why anonymously? Because I knew if the family found out I was wealthy enough to bail out Montgomery Industries, everything would change. You'd treat me differently. Victoria would have been even more competitive and destructive. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. My attempts to protect my family from the corrupting influence of my success had actually enabled Victoria's crimes to continue unchecked. What happens now? My mother asked. Now I will stop hiding, I said. I take an active role in Montgomery Industries. I use my resources and connections to rebuild what Victoria destroyed. And I let the world see who Alexis Montgomery really is. That afternoon, I held my first public press conference. The ballroom at the Four Seasons was packed with reporters, cameras, and curious onlookers. Rachel had arranged everything perfectly: professional lighting, multiple camera angles, and a backdrop that showcased both Montgomery Industries and Sterling Digital Solutions logos. I walked to the podium in a power suit that cost more than most people's cars, my bearing confident and commanding. This wasn't the quiet marketing coordinator Victoria had tried to destroy. This was the CEO who'd built a multi-million-dollar empire from nothing. Good afternoon, I began, my voice carrying clearly through the room. My name is Alexis Montgomery, founder and CEO of Sterling Digital Solutions and majority shareholder in Montgomery Industries. The room was dead silent, every reporter hanging on my words. Yesterday, my wedding was disrupted by false allegations orchestrated by my sister, Victoria Montgomery, who has since been arrested for embezzlement, fraud, and identity theft. I paused, letting that sink in. Victoria Montgomery stole $2.3 million from our family's company and fabricated evidence to destroy my personal relationships because she couldn't accept that her unsuccessful little sister had built something bigger than she ever could. The questions started flying immediately, but I held up my hand for silence. The narrative that I was a gold digger or financially dependent was not just false, it was the opposite of reality. I am worth approximately $127 million, and I have been financially supporting various family ventures for years. A murmur went through the crowd. That number was higher than anyone had estimated. I chose to keep my financial success private because I wanted my relationships to be based on who I am as a person, not what I'm worth as a bank account. My sister exploited that privacy to nearly destroy my life with lies. I looked directly into the main camera. Victoria Montgomery gambled that I was powerless to fight back. She was wrong. The press conference continued for another hour. with me methodically dismantling every lie Victoria had told and providing evidence for every claim I made. By the time I finished, the narrative was completely reversed. I wasn't the exposed gold digger. I was the secret billionaire who'd been betrayed by a jealous criminal sister. That evening, safe in my penthouse, I watched the news coverage with a glass of wine and a sense of satisfaction I hadn't felt in months. Victoria's mugshot was on every channel, her crimes dissected by financial experts and legal analysts. My phone rang. It was David. "I saw the press conference," he said. "You were incredible, powerful, like a completely different person." "Not different," I corrected, "just finally visible." "Alexis, I know I don't deserve another chance, but seeing you today, I fell in love with you all over again, the real you." I looked out at the Seattle skyline, thinking about second chances and whether some betrayals could ever truly be forgiven. "We'll see, David," I said finally. "We'll see. But first I had a sister to bury. Metaphorically speaking, of course." 6 months later, I stood in the boardroom of Montgomery Industries, looking out at the Seattle skyline from the 42nd floor. The view was spectacular, but it wasn't what held my attention. It was the signed documents on the conference table that officially made me the new CEO of the family company. The transformation had been swift and decisive. Within weeks of Victoria's arrest, the board had voted unanimously to remove her from all positions and install me as interim leader. The interim part became permanent when I successfully negotiated new contracts that brought the company back from the brink of bankruptcy. "The quarterly reports are in," announced James Chen, our new CFO and Sarah's older brother, whom I'd recruited from a major consulting firm. "Profits are up 43% from last quarter. We're not just stable, we're thriving." Around the table sat my hand-picked executive team, a mixture of Montgomery Industries veterans and fresh talent I'd brought in from Sterling Digital Solutions. The old boys club that had enabled Victoria's crimes was gone, replaced by people who'd earned their positions through merit rather than politics. "The pharmaceutical division is particularly strong," added Maria Santos, our head of operations. "The new client contracts Alexis secured are generating more revenue than we've seen in 3 years." I smiled, remembering how Victoria used to dismiss my work as playing around with computers. Those computer skills had saved the family business and expanded it into new markets she'd never even considered. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "Victoria's sentencing is this afternoon. Media wants a statement." Victoria's trial had been a sensation. The evidence of her crimes was overwhelming, and her attempts to claim she'd been framed fell apart under scrutiny. Her fake text messages, illegal computer access, and embezzlement were all documented beyond any reasonable doubt. More damaging to her case was the character testimony. Former colleagues testified about her manipulative behavior, her sense of entitlement, and her pattern of taking credit for other people's work. The prosecution painted a picture of someone who'd been building toward this level of criminal behavior for years. "I don't need to make a statement about Victoria," I told Rachel when I called her back. "Let the sentence speak for itself." 3 hours later, the news broke. Victoria Montgomery had been sentenced to 18 years in federal prison without possibility of parole for the first 12 years. The judge had been particularly harsh, noting that she'd, quote, "betrayed not only her family's trust, but used her position of authority to systematically steal from the company that employed hundreds of people." I felt no satisfaction in the news. Victoria had destroyed herself through her own choices, and while justice had been served, it didn't undo the damage she'd caused to our family. My parents had aged visibly over the past months. The scandal, the trial, and the loss of their elder daughter had taken a toll that went beyond physical appearance. They'd moved to their house in Napa Valley, unable to face the Seattle social circles, where Victoria's crimes were still the subject of gossip. That evening, I drove to David's apartment. We'd been seeing each other again. Slowly, carefully, with both of us understanding that trust once broken required deliberate rebuilding. He answered the door in jeans and a sweater, looking more relaxed than he had in months. The stress of the scandal had initially made things worse for him professionally, as clients questioned his judgment. But as the truth about Victoria's manipulation became clear, His reputation had recovered. "How are you feeling about the sentence?" he asked as we settled on his couch with takeout from our favorite Thai restaurant. "I feel like a chapter is finally closed," I said. "Victoria made her choices, and now she has to live with the consequences." "Do you think you'll ever forgive her?" It was a question I'd been asking myself for months. Forgiveness was complicated when the person who'd wronged you had shown no genuine remorse, only anger at being caught. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Maybe someday. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or pretending it didn't happen." David reached for my hand, his touch gentle and tentative. "What about us? Do you think you'll ever completely trust me again?" That was the harder question. David had believed Victoria's lies, but he'd also been manipulated by someone who'd had years to study his insecurities and craft the perfect deception. "Trust isn't binary," I said, intertwining our fingers. "It's not something you either have completely or don't have at all. We're building it back piece by piece." "I love you," he said quietly. "I know I don't say it enough, but I do. The real you. The CEO, the secret millionaire, the woman who rebuilt her family's company. All of it." I leaned against his shoulder, feeling a peace I hadn't experienced in years. "I love you too. That's why we're here, working on this." The next morning brought unexpected news. My assistant, Jennifer, knocked on my office door with an expression I couldn't read. "There's someone here to see you," she said. "She says she's family, but she's not on the approved visitor list." My heart sank, thinking Victoria had somehow been released or was calling from prison. But the woman who walked into my office was someone I hadn't seen in over a decade. "Hello, Alexis," said my Aunt Catherine, my father's sister who'd moved to London years ago. "I came as soon as I heard about everything that happened." Catherine had always been the family rebel, the one who'd rejected the Montgomery name and expectations to become a successful art dealer in Europe. She looked elegant and sophisticated, her silver hair cut in a stylish bob, her clothing expensive but understated. "I'm sorry I wasn't here for the wedding," she said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "Or for the aftermath. I should have been here to support you." "You couldn't have known what Victoria was planning," I said. Catherine's expression was knowing. "Couldn't I?" "Alexis, I saw the signs of who Victoria was becoming when she was still a teenager. The jealousy, the manipulation, the need to tear others down to build herself up." "Then why didn't you say anything?" "Because your parents didn't want to hear it. Richard and Helen were so proud of their golden child that they couldn't see her flaws. And you were always so determined to prove yourself without family help that I thought you'd figure it out on your own." She looked around my office, taking in the awards, the photos with Fortune 500 executives, the evidence of the empire I'd built. "You did figure it out," she said with obvious pride. "You became everything Victoria pretended to be." "I became myself," I corrected. "Finally." Catherine smiled. "That's exactly right, and now that you have, I have a proposition for you." She pulled out a folder and slid it across my desk. "I'm expanding my gallery business back to the United States. I want to partner with Montgomery Industries to create a new division, Corporate Art Consultation and Cultural Investment." I flipped through the proposal, impressed by the scope and potential profitability. "This could generate significant revenue," I said, already seeing the possibilities. "More than that, it could give the Montgomery name a completely different association. Instead of being known for Victoria's crimes, we could be known for supporting artists and cultural institutions." It was brilliant. A way to transform the family legacy and move beyond the scandal that had dominated headlines for months. "I'll need to review this with my team," I said, "but I'm definitely interested." "Take your time," Catherine said, standing to leave. "I'll be in town for a few weeks. Maybe we could have dinner? I'd love to hear about this young man you're rebuilding trust with." After she left, I sat in my office thinking about legacy and transformation. Victoria had tried to destroy me because she couldn't bear that I'd succeeded where she'd failed. But in the end, her destruction had only revealed the strength I'd been hiding for years. That evening, David and I met my parents for dinner at their hotel. They were in town briefly to handle some legal matters related to Victoria's case and the company restructuring. "You look happy," my mother observed as we sat down at the restaurant. "I am happy," I said, surprised to realize it was completely true. "Even after everything that happened?" especially after everything that happened. I spent years hiding who I really was, letting Victoria diminish me, playing small to keep peace. Now I don't have to do that anymore. My father raised his wine glass. To Alexis Montgomery, who saved our family's legacy and showed us what real strength looks like. To new beginnings, I countered, raising my own glass. As we toasted, I caught David's eye across the table. He smiled, and I saw not just love in his expression but respect and admiration for the woman I'd become. 6 months ago, Victoria had tried to destroy my life with one elaborate lie. Instead, she'd freed me to become everything I was always meant to be. And for that, despite everything, I was almost grateful. Almost. The real victory wasn't that Victoria was in prison, or that my reputation was restored, or even that my company was thriving. The real victory was that I finally felt comfortable in my own skin, no longer hiding my success or apologizing for my ambitions. Victoria had destroyed my wedding, but in doing so, she'd given me something much more valuable: the courage to be authentically myself. And that, I realized, was worth more than any revenge I could have planned. The woman who'd stood at the altar 6 months ago, devastated and humiliated, was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, wiser, and unafraid to take up space in the world. Victoria had tried to make me smaller. Instead, she'd set me free. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.